and it is my pleasure to welcome Akash founder and Overclock Labs CEO Greg Astori to the stage.
Thank you, Amanda. It's amazing. We have about 1,000 people registered, so seeing this incredible community. It's not always obvious online, who the person behind the keyboard is. So having an opportunity to bring people together and see in real life and really look at how loving and engaging this community is incredible. So I want to take this opportunity, host an all-day event. So much happens across Akash. And even our team, it's hard to keep up what's happening, right? So this is a incredible time to welcome everybody. So before we wanted to kick off the event, I wanted to actually take a trip down the memory lane because it's not very obvious, how we came. A lot of people don't really have the context how we came about. So if you really put the origin, the Genesis block, we founded the company Overclock Labs since 2015. My co-founder here, Adam Bozanich, that's him in the photo. He founded, after 2 kids and 10 years down on the experience belt. It's funny because Overclock began right after Kubernetes was founded. Kubernetes was launched in 2014, and we were so fascinated by the technology, we wanted to make Kubernetes a more production-ready and fault-tolerant across the globe. These are some of the origins, right? I have a tendency to keep my notes archived, and I was just pulling up some of the old designs for Akash, and you can see the kind of parallels that we have in the design to what Akash today is, to what we originally began. Things haven't changed. The vision remained intact. Only the product came along quite a lot. We began the company in 2015 to make edge computing or high performance computing a possibility with Kubernetes as a foundational layer. And during the course of our development, we wrote quite a lot of code, right? We wrote a few libraries that are very actively used by Kubernetes community. In fact, there's a video here from 2015 that talks about Akash. So the first line of code for Akash was written about 9 years ago. And this is a video here. If you follow the link, you'll see how we were able to essentially boot up global clusters, about 20 different locations you can boot up in a single click and have them communicate in a single namespace, single IP address space. So all this very advanced stuff that we were doing, all this clustering across the globe, like federated clustering, all that, we began really 9 years ago. And the journey, it's amazing how far we've come along. And some of the libraries we wrote got very high prominence in the community. This is a screenshot from GitHub. You can see here I was ranked number 4 for the libraries we've written for Akash. I mean, right in between Google and Mozilla, and only human being on the list, and ranked number 13 across the globe. This is for Golang, and the other ones for Globe, because our code that we wrote are deeply embedded in the Kubernetes ecosystem at this point. If I delete these repos, the internet will break. So, this is the beginnings of Akash was founded in this deep infrastructure passion and libraries we wrote. And the libraries are now used by some few known companies that you probably heard of. These are the original Akash source code. Now it's used by NVIDIA, IBM's HashiCorps of the world. Still date, right? So in fact, NVIDIA uses Akash libraries in their Kubernetes drivers. So any decentralized network or network that uses Kubernetes and NVIDIA GPUs effectively use Akash source code today. AWS CLI actually uses Akash source code to a lot of the Department of Defense to Dockers of the world. Akash is very deeply integrated. Akash's libraries that are deeply integrated into some of this source code. And all this is verifiable. If you go to the GitHubs, you'll be able to see, actually see the dependencies. It's fascinating to see how far the libraries have spread across, right? And really, if originally when we founded Akash, we didn't go down the decentralized route. In fact, it was very centralized. Even though we're doing this large-scale cluster deployments, the control plane was very centralized in the sense it was usually on a server or two. But the challenge with centralized control plane is fault tolerance, right? So when you have large clusters talking to a single control plane, the chances of the control plane breaking down or causing deadlocks is a common issue, right? So we quickly realized that you cannot scale to any level of high performance using a centralized control plane. The only way to really massively scale is go back to the roots, how internet was founded, a decentralized network where instead of a single control plane, we could have a decentralized control plane where there's no dependency on a single point of failure. So, and we discovered that was an incredible way to scale, and that's how we kind of stumbled upon blockchains, because blockchains happen to be the only data structure that would allow us to have a decentralized control mechanism or decentralized coordination mechanism, right? So we originally began as Kubernetes and very deep infrastructure software to realizing that decentralization is the way to go. This was somewhere in 2016, 2017 timeframe, and that's where our decentralized journey really began. We wrote a paper, we published, actually the first version in 2017, but the subsequent version in 2018, that introduced a notion of a supercloud, right? So the Akash supercloud platform, where we said, well, we can decouple the control plane from the resource plane, where the resources could effectively be any cloud-capable compute, and the control plane in a decentralized setting can actually create something called a supercloud. And the idea of a supercloud was getting formulated. I think Cornell was the company that, the institution that really formalized the word, but we really liked the idea and what supercloud represented, and aligned really well with our values and what we've been building as open source developers, and it was not hard for us to see how that's relevant to building Akash. And in fact, in 2018, we also, in our white paper, we talked about primary use case being machine learning, right? So we looked at GPUs, we looked at we anticipated the need for GPUs because the data was incredible. It was very, very, very transparent. The cost of GPUs and the cost of compute was only going to go up for machine learning because the data sets are just getting larger and larger. And in fact, we specified the primary use case for Akash is machine learning. It just took 7 years to realize that, but this is really, some of these papers we wrote are incredible wealth of history behind Akash. And it was just, 2018, we chose Cosmos. Actually, we began on Ethereum initially, and it was very obvious for us that Ethereum was not going to scale, and Cosmos was the only sort of like framework that would allow us to create our own sovereign blockchains. But the challenge with Cosmos is there was very little community. So we, in fact, created this incredible way to recruit community through testnets, right? So you hear airdrops and incentives now very common, but back then in 2018, nobody really thought about how do you even go build a validated community, right? Because how do you recruit folks to even validate your chain? Fortunately, with Akash, we gave out 3 million AKT, which is quite a lot now, back then. And we were able to attract a lot of developers. And the good thing about Akash is very easy for folks to understand. It's a cloud network. It's easy if you use the cloud, use Akash, right? So we are very fortunate to be able to attract technically minded folks that would come and experience the testnets, experience the product, and some of them ended up being validators. And these validators ended up actually purchasing a lot of our tokens because they wanted to validate this. So we didn't really raise money from your traditional means. We raised money from people that use Akash or validate on Akash, right? So that's how we were able to bootstrap, and that became the foundation for our culture, right? Because we are a culture of users that want to build a world that we see we should operate like. And I'm so glad that our first investors are quote unquote users of Akash network token happen to be the validators who also happen to be technically aligned that could actually use Akash network to deploy their node. So it became such an incredible, owner-owned network from the get-go. And I think that set a very strong culture as we went radically open source. We launched a mainnet in 2020. First time ever a decentralized network could launch general purpose compute. There was nothing like it. The only thing that was close to Akash was Golem, and Golem was not general purpose, it was a special purpose compute. And Akash was the first general purpose compute that you can actually demonstrate a Docker container running in a decentralized setting. They call it the Airbnb for data centers without the cleaning fee. So, the transparent pricing and the open sourceness was very attractive. It didn't obviously have all the great features that we have today, but it was ephemeral. It was very foundational nature in 2020. As we went about deploying and developing Akash Network, we made some incredible progress, right? We added persistent storage, which enabled databases and enabled storage, heavy applications to be able to deploy on Akash. We did IP address-based discovery, which allows for a lot more versatility when it comes to discovering nodes. In fact, Akash is one of the largest IP address marketplaces. We don't really talk much about it, but one of the beautiful things about IPs, which is really a scarce resource, right? I think IPs are more scarce than gold. Think about it, right? It'd be cool to have an IP coin someday that's backed by IP addresses, but it's really a scarce namespace. But Akash is a great place to get IP addresses. And of course, the big update that came in 2023 was accelerated compute with GPUs. And that, even though we set out our journey in 2018 to get accelerated, took a long time to get here because NVIDIA really didn't have drivers, enabled for Kubernetes. In fact, if you look at my source code being using NVIDIA drivers, again, which is used by us, it's just a very incredible circular loop we go, right? It's awesome to see how commingling of open source software happens, and that's really, we take a lot of pride because building decentralized systems is about building up upon each other's work, right? And building open source systems is about building upon each other's work, and that's very central to Akash as a culture. And the latest we did is private containers, and as you know, privacy is very hard on blockchains. In fact, anything private is, of course, all the data that's here on Akash, the system containers are private, but the access to the container has to be public by design. But by shipping private containers means we had to think about how do you do secrets management. It's a very complicated aspect we were able to ship this year. One of the key moments for Akash is going radically open source. In a sense, even though we began as open source, the source code was open, but not the process to get the source code. But at the beginning of 2023, and really in the end of 2022 and beginning of 2023, we went radically open source in the sense, including the process of setting the roadmap is open source, along with the code. That was such an incredible, a moment for us because now we're able to attract all the way from, I think we had 20 or 30 contributors before we open source to now, before we went process open source, now we have about 500 contributors to Akash Network. Every aspect of Akash Network is open source, all the way from product meetings. We don't have any Overclock Labs, which is the primary contributor to Akash, does not conduct any private product meetings anymore. It's all done in the public. The video is posted on a permanent chain, on our blockchain. Go to our GitHub, you'll be able to see the entire history of all the meetings, all the decisions made. Meetings are transcribed and easy for people to read. So in case you don't come to a meeting, you can catch up. You can use an AI now, I guess. People are training on our meeting notes. So you can actually ask, hey, who made this decision, when, and why was X feature not enabled, even though it was in the roadmap. So you can have this wealth of knowledge is completely open. And so when people come build tomorrow, they have this history. They can go back to and ask reasons why, right? With AI, you're able to achieve so much more in terms of how back and how easy you can retrieve information. And Akash, GitHub is a wealth of information. We have publicly funding enabled, right? And that's a key aspect of being open source. Open source is great, but if you don't have a way to sustain open source, it's kind of useless. And we see that happen quite a lot with Kubernetes. And Kubernetes, we have a contributor churn problem now, right? So people come and contribute because I love the software, but at the same time, how do you sustain doing that in a full-time setting? So Akash has a very open funding mechanism. There are about 30 proposals that fund various activities of Akash. In fact, this conference is funded by the community, right? Even though Akash doesn't have a leader, I'm just a core contributor. Me going first doesn't mean I'm leading the project. I am a contributor to the project. Hopefully, I would like to see next Akash Accelerator someone else give this keynote, and that's really the goal, right? The goal of Akash is to create an open environment where participation is equal on every field. You can actually scan this link. You can see the funding proposal. So if you have an idea for Akash, to build an Akash, be it software, be it events, be it anything, you can actually apply for funding. I think there are about $30 million in the community pool that are actively delegated for funding different aspects of Akash. This model was designed after Kubernetes, so we were able to take what worked in the previous prominent open source software and being able to leverage that in Akash. So incredible stories. We have two companies three, in fact, Overclock Labs, CloudMOS, and Praetor, all different companies, building on top of Akash now merge, right? So a common pattern we see is open source companies, when you don't have a sustainable way to continue your operations, we found a way to keep those teams going, right? So CloudMos was a client built on top of Akash, built by our community members, because Overclock Labs, by design, did not build a client, because we think client is where you capture most value. So we let that opportunity for anyone that's aspiring, and gave one opportunity for people to go build clients. So we have about 7 different clients now on Akash, and one of them happened to be CloudMos, which is the most popular and most widely used client, building on top of Akash now part of Overclock Labs, but still funded by the community. We just act as a vehicle for them to operate. Same thing with Praetor. Praetor makes provider management on Akash extremely simple. Now we're part of the Overclock Labs team, and we're creating an incredible cohesive product now with Praetor and CloudMos. With accelerated compute, this was the first time a decentralized network is able to offer high-density compute on demand for general purpose purposes, right? So till now, there's no other network that could offer a GPU to run a Docker container, right? Akash is the first one. In fact, the price points are so attractive. You can get sub $2 H100s on demand, which is unheard of, right? So Akash still remains to be the only general purpose platform that can offer price points at these levels. I mean, for context, H100 on Akash costs about $1.46. Same thing would cost about $12 on Amazon. If you can get it, that is, right? It's very hard to get compute on anywhere, on-demand compute. In order to get H100s, you need to get into this long contracts. No one's going to give you a researcher that wants 2 H100s on demand. It's just the demand supply is just not there yet. I can do a whole talk on like GPU supply shortage, but yeah, Akash being able to offer H100s is meaningful, because when you see, there's this story on Semaphore, highly encourage you to read it. I call it Spice Must Flow, because right now, researchers or anyone that's starting a company that doesn't have millions of dollars to get into this long contracts with these hyperscalers, have really no way to get GPUs, right? In fact, Semaphore did a piece. This is in last year, in October 25th. This is the first time mainstream press is actually talking positive about crypto. I mean, till now we've been riddled with FTX of the world and SBS of the world. I mean, and the Terra Lunas of the world. For the first time, they said something positive about crypto, and that story was highlighting Akash. This story is about how a Columbia student was, an AI researcher in Columbia, trying to get a bunch of chips to do some fine tuning, was not able to get chips anywhere, right? And then they could come to Akash and easily find the chips. And actually, in fact, that student ended up starting a company because he was so excited, and that company got acquired all within like 4 weeks. And he's actually in the audience somewhere. So he's working with this company called Brev, which is loved, which is loved all around by AI researchers. He is here to talk about his story, but this story is very, very interesting for those of you that want to go check it out. Growing ecosystem, we have amazing companies now building Akash. A lot of AI now. AI is just taken over. We have News Research, which is a very prominent team. They're known for their model called Hermes. They're training their model on Akash now. And University of Austin, the professor is here to talk about various programs that we have going on with a lot of researchers there. Brev, which is very popular machine learning platform as a service. You can go to Brev today and just deploy Akash nodes very quickly without credit cards, without crypto or anything. It's just a very mainstream sort of like application. NodeShift, they recently were on the building a GPU aggregator. They were on TechCrunch recently about their funding announcement. In fact, we found out about NodeShift from TechCrunch because they mentioned they raised X amount of $1 million to build on top of Akash. And that's what permissionless systems are. It's beautiful when you see like examples, and then we hit them up, and they're like, oh, they're cool people, right? So it's amazing. We don't do partnership announcements, as you know. Maybe very, very rarely do announcements. We never almost do any announcements without integration, right? So we're famous for doing announcements post-integration, or at least have a demo, right? We don't do announcements after phone calls, for first phone calls like most people in crypto are leaning towards. But building an amazing, and Morpheus is, again, here, Venice, which is Venice AI, which is Eric Wood, his new project. Eric will be here very soon. them using Akash, he mentioned, and he loves Akash and whatnot. So it's an amazing, growing ecosystem of folks that are integrating Akash deeply into the protocols and products. And so far, we were able to do 58 million gigabyte hours. So memory is one of the most scarce resources that we measure our success on. With 58 million gigabyte hours is a lot of gigabyte hours. If you look at our trend, our last quarter, AI has been a phenomenal demand generator, and you can see the trend how we were, we're not that growing, but the last quarter for somehow we just took off, right? That also aligns fairly well with leases. Leases are applications deployed on Akash, about 180,000 applications deployed in total, in aggregate on Akash. You can also see the trend in last year, we just shot up, right? So, with that, our key priorities today remains to be continuing to get adoption, which means removing friction, right? So Akash, the way I describe it is, as you can see the history when we began Akash, it was really to make Kubernetes usable, right? Because Kubernetes is only used when you have to scale. It's not used when you have to just bootstrap a single application, right? Kubernetes is like taking a Ferrari to get groceries, right? So, and that we have the same problem because Akash is built for scale. We really originally designed for scale, but we haven't quite made efforts in addressing users that are not looking for scale, they're just looking to tinker, right? Like researchers, for example. Most machine learning folks don't really yet care about scale. They care about running the PyTorch or some simple application. They care about SSHing into a box, right? So those simple use cases, Akash doesn't, it supports, but you have to quite a lot of work to get to those simple use cases, right? So a big challenge is how do you make a Ferrari that you can take to groceries? Right, that's really the challenge, right? So with Console 2.0, I'm very, very excited. We're making some incredible investments. Happy to show you what we have going on. The goal is to attract anybody and everybody, and we have cloud practitioners, AI researchers, traditional developers that are not crypto, right? How do you get them to use? Because really, Akash's most users, as you can see in the previous slide, are mostly non-crypto folks, and that's really we take a lot of pride there. And when people use Akash, people shouldn't say the crypto is just a infrastructure thing. Is not the product. The product is a cloud. And on the other side, as we improve our demand, we also need to improve our supply. And some of the things we're doing is through incentives, right? So we are very careful on how we design incentives. As you can see, some of the newer networks got Sybil attacked, and for a reason, right? The reason we don't want to go broad is because it's very challenging to do incentives really well. If you just go open and be like, hey, let's see what happens, you get Sybil attacked, right? So you get, because it's crypto. So designing incentives where those attacks or the attack surface is minimal, at the same time the quality is higher, is very, very hard, especially for non-verifiable compute. So designing a system where we are currently in pilot for the incentives, which worked out really well, and we are very careful in what the kind of proposals we make that'll lead to our FDV, because you get one shot and you waste all the incentives early without thinking through carefully as to how these incentives are distributed, you're not going to get another shot. And we see so many failures in crypto, including some of the big ones that I don't want to name, but some of the big ones that ran out of the tokens because they were too broad, too early, without nailing your demand. So it has to be a good equilibrium in terms of your supply and demand. It's about utilization. It's not about how many GPUs you have, right? So our utilization, fortunately, our lifetime utilization is about 40% for GPUs, which is fairly high. In fact, for high density GPUs, it's significantly higher, somewhere north of 60%, right? So we always keep that utilization as our North Star. So oversupply or over demand is not a good thing. So that's really what our goal is, to keep that good equilibrium, because providers need a good demand, whereas the tenants need to see racks full when they come to the store, right? So that's really the challenge. And the new user experience is broad, right? Of course, the goal of console to be able to invoke from pretty much any link we have, from the console, direct link to GPU landing, and we have some incredible ways to use Akash. One-click launch a vanilla SUSE or a Ubuntu instance that looks and feels like a VM. So with regular SSH, with regular whatever you used to using a DigitalOcean. So that's the goal, without going through the crypto experience, right? Akash right now is non-custodial only, so we'll be adding managed features. where you'll be able to pay, log in using Google or GitHub, using credit card, along with making sure that you have the non-custodial aspect intact, because we can't compromise custody for convenience, which is not a choice. It is an optional. It's not a must, but it's an optional aspect, right? So you can either choose custodial or you can choose a non-custodial experience. And the goal is to minimize as much as custody from anyone, right? But we do realize that we need to be managed for folks to be able to experience Akash without crypto. So a lot of good things coming in Console 2.0 and a roadmap, right? So we look at, so far we've come quite a lot, and the goal really is to get to cloud parity, in the sense like, in a few years from now, we should be able to go to Walmart or some large company and be like, hey, you can move all your stuff from Amazon to Akash. We're not there yet. We need to build a lot of capabilities, right? So we are very hyper-focused on key primitives that will move the needle pretty aggressively, but we have incredible stuff, all the way from reserved instances, all the way from managed backends. That means you'll be able to plug in a database or a cache server that's managed by someone else and not managed by you. That makes it super easy for you to use Akash, access control, reputation management, secrets management, a whole lot of things that are coming up on a roadmap. I mean, you can scan the link for actual roadmap in what we have going on, so you'll be able to see the real meat. In fact, if you look at the roadmap from before, this is a roadmap from 2019. You see the private containers here. Nothing has changed much. I mean, we kept improving and just kept delivering. So one of the amazing things about Akash is that I take a lot of pride in how consistency we are, right? Like all the way from writing our white paper to designing our first roadmap to delivering on the roadmap. We haven't changed course, and we haven't pivoted. We haven't done anything. We're one of the few projects that actually delivered what we say we're going to deliver in our white paper, and continue to do so, right? So our roadmap is not very different, right? And you can see a lot. If you actually, the slides will be out very soon. You can compare some of this stuff. In fact, I have these books in there. I'm happy to show you, but it's amazing to see and review your history and be like, hey, we were. It took 4 years to get private containers, but we got it. It took 5 years to get GPUs, but we have it, right? So it's awesome. Yeah, thank you, and here to answer any questions.